Seek My Face by John Updike, book review. So John Updike was like a lot of authors. I encountered him in a college literature class. I was an English minor, and I enjoyed him. I was moderately intrigued by him. I meant to read more of him, and then I never did, much like a lot of the authors I encountered in college. But I came across one of his short stories earlier this year in the short story anthology on writing short stories, which was called A&P, and I really enjoyed it. A&P was about a 19-year-old kid working at a small town grocery store. And I thought that not only was it pretty funny, it was pretty insightful as well. Reading it, I thought, yeah, that's exactly the kind of thing that would be going through a 19-year-old's head. So now that I'm back in the USA, my first library trip, I was looking out for John Updike books, and I found this one, Seek My Face. Now, this is one of Updike's newer books. It was published in 2002, and it was a little bit harder for me to get into than I thought it would be. The novel is a story of an old woman who was she is a famous artist like painter. And she's also been married to some very famous artists during her life. And she's being interviewed by a much younger woman for a magazine article. And during the course of the interview, the older woman recalls all the stories of her life. Now, this was hard for me to get into for a number of reasons. For that matter, I wonder how easy it was for Updike to write. I don't know how well Updike can imagine things from the perspective of a woman. Maybe this is just my prejudice, but I tend to think that we men are very bad at understanding what women think, but women are very good at understanding what men think. Maybe that's sexist of me, I don't know. But I was reading through this book and I was thinking, how does Updike know? Now, as the book moves throughout the years, there's a lot of art history mixed in with it. Now, some of this is kind of real art history, and some of this is fictional art history, like within the world of the novel. And I think the famous artists that are in the book are based on real kind of famous artists in real life. Now, somebody who doesn't really know their art history well, like me, I had a hard time figuring out where the real history ended and the fictional history of the book began. But if you're into art history, you might get a lot more out of this book than I did. You'd probably certainly understand it a lot better than I did. Most of the book is a conversation between two women with flashbacks mixed in. So the narrative doesn't feel like it has a lot of forward force. Rather, it's an older woman looking back on her life. It's much more of an introspective book. Nothing bad about that per se, but the reader should be warned ahead of time. It's not like a gripping book where you're turning the pages frantically. Actually, I say page turner, I actually did this as an audiobook. I'm not quite sure I would have had the patience to finish this if I read it as a print book, but that's the beauty of audiobooks. They let you read all sorts of books that you never would have had the patience for otherwise.